Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of my sub 3-hour marathon training series. In this series, I want to go over different aspects of my training and my running to show you what I'm doing to try and achieve a sub 3-hour in the marathon. And some of the questions I get most often when it comes to my marathon training and my running are, what are some of my favorite or essential pieces of running gear? And so I figured a great place to start with episode 1 is going over my top 5 essential pieces of running gear for marathon training. Now, really quick, with these 5 pieces of gear, it's actually 5 kind of like segments of gear with like 2 to 3 pieces of gear within each. So it's actually more like 12 to 15 pieces of essential training gear. So what I'll try and do to keep this video short is just give a brief overview of each piece of gear and one reason why I find it essential for my marathon training. So let's get to it. All right, so my first essential piece of running gear for marathon training is wearables, and I'll start with my GPS watch. This is the Pace 3, which is a GPS watch from Coros, and honestly, I wouldn't be able to do any of my training without a GPS watch. I track all of my runs with this watch. I'm also able to load workouts into this watch, which make it a lot easier to be able to execute whatever interval I need to at whatever pace range I need to for my runs. So obviously this has to be like number 1 on the essential list. But another reason the GPS watch isn't essential for my marathon training is that not only am I able to track my runs, I'm able to track things like my training load, I'm able to track my sleep, my daily stress, my HRV, and my heart rate as well. And I'm able to obviously track all of my runs over the length of the training plan or a training block to be able to see the type of progression I'm making, as well as make decisions in the day-to-day of training to make sure that I'm not doing too much or doing too little when it comes to training for that sub 3 hour in the marathon. The next wearable is the heart rate strap from Coros. Similar to the GPS watch, there's not a single run I go on that I do not wear this. I primarily like the heart rate band because it gives me the ability to get a more accurate reading for my heart rate. Before I had the armband, I used to have the chest strap as well. I'm a big believer in utilizing heart rate data to see how I'm performing in each run and see how my body's responding to the training. I don't live or die by heart rate, but it is still good to have an extra data point to make sure that as I'm looking at the training, is everything progressing in the right direction so that I'm going to be able to hit that goal in the sub 3 hour marathon. And the heart rate monitor just helps me get a more accurate picture of that data with my heart rate in each run. And the last piece of gear from the wearable section is the Pod 2 from Coros. Again, similar to the watch and the heart rate monitor, this is just another tool I use to help me track my runs more accurately across any distance. I really enjoy the Pod 2 because I can utilize it on the treadmill as well as outdoors, so I never really have to worry about like missing out with bad satellite reception, or if like I'm in a city or anything like that. And then on the treadmill, I can get more accurate pacing as well with the Pod 2. So again, similar to that heart rate monitor and the watch, I don't do a single run without this, and it just helps me get a better, more accurate picture of the data for each run so that, again, I can make sure everything's tracking in the right direction towards that sub 3 hour marathon. Now, before I do move on to the next section of essential marathon training gear, I do want to give a quick disclaimer that I'm actually partnered with Coros Global for these wearables. So Coros did send me the watch as well as the heart rate band and the foot pod, but Coros has no say in these videos. They don't see them before I release them. The opinions on these wearables are mine and mine alone. And honestly, even if Coros wasn't sponsoring me, I would still be using a GPS watch. I'd still be using some type of heart rate monitor, and I'd most likely be using some type of foot pod to help me get that accurate data. So like I said, I can make sure that I'm looking at the entire puzzle when it comes to my training to make sure that I'm tracking towards that sub 3 hour marathon or whatever goal I have for whatever distance I'm running. All right, so the second running gear essential for my marathon training is hydration, and we'll start with water bottles. So right here, I have 2 different Nathan water bottles. I actually started with this water bottle alone. I believe it's like 12 or 18 ounces. And then just realized on some of my long runs that I was running out of water like 4 to 6 miles short, and the summer's been pretty hot. And so I went and upgraded to like an 18 to 22 ounce water bottle as well. Took this on my last 18-mile long run, and it did the trick on providing water for the entire run. The water bottle is something that's newer to my marathon training gear, but quickly became an essential to how I perform my training. One, to make sure that I'm staying hydrated throughout my runs, and then two, it helps me practice what I'm actually going to be doing on race day. So one of the biggest faults I would say with previous marathons or any race that I did was that throughout all of my training, no matter how long the training block was, whether it's 12 weeks or 20 weeks, I wasn't taking water with me, only gels. And the biggest issue I was running into is that's not how I would execute on race day. So race day would come and I'd be hitting all the water stations. And I always found that at some point in the race, I started to feel waterlogged, and it just didn't really work because I hadn't been training, taking in water throughout my runs, so throughout my training. So then I'd go into race day and basically do something completely new on race day that my body just was not prepared for. And so speaking of hydration with the water bottles, I've also been using Liquid IV as well as Ultima electrolytes. I use these primarily for after running as well as before running if it's going to be a long run or a more intense workout. So usually on the day-to-day where I'm doing easy runs or recovery run, I'll just take some of this after, and I usually just do the Ultima because it's a little less in sodium. It only has 55 milligrams, whereas the Liquid IV has 530 milligrams of sodium. So I really only save the Liquid IV for those extremely intense workouts where it's pretty heavy, or on days where it was like really hot in the summer and I sweat a lot, and I know I sweat more than I probably should have. That's where the Liquid IV would come in with the higher sodium content. But for most of my runs, I'm pretty much just doing the Ultima after to make sure that I'm refueling with electrolytes and not just water, to make sure that I'm getting that salt intake back into my body to help me be able to show up every single day ready to perform. All right, so the third running gear essential for my marathon training is supplements. And I'll start with this thing right here, which is larger than my head. But one of the main reasons I want to highlight supplements for my marathon training is that supplements are essential. And again, similar to that hydration, making sure I'm able to show up every single day ready to perform at my best. And protein is a huge part of that. One thing I noticed with prior training was that I didn't get much of a protein intake beside what I was eating on a day-to-day basis, but I didn't really have a focus on how much protein I was getting in. And part of muscle recovery and muscle building is obviously protein synthesis. And so the more protein you can have in your body, the better it helps your muscles be able to recover and build upon what you're doing when you're tearing them down in each of your workouts and each of your runs. And so I have this pea protein from Naked. One of the main reasons I actually like this protein is there's literally 3 ingredients. So it's not as flavorful as some of your other protein mixes you have, but I like that it's not an entire paragraph of ingredients that you don't even or can't even pronounce half the names of. So this again is an essential. I have a protein shake every single day after my run. And the second training gear essential for supplements is creatine. This is also from Naked, and similar to the protein powder. The main reason I like it is it's just a single ingredient. It's the creatine monohydrate. There's literally nothing else in this. And one of the main reasons that creatine is essential for my marathon training is that I follow a plant-based diet, and creatine is pretty much non-existent within that diet. But another reason is that creatine is a great supplement to provide energy for muscles, as well as helping muscles carry water so that they can recover a little better. If you're someone who doesn't really know much about creatine and wants to know more, I'll leave a link from Healthline down below with 10 benefits of creatine. And the last supplement is the multivitamin. This is from Ritual. It's the Essential for Men. Again, similar to the protein and the creatine, it's just making sure that I'm getting everything necessary within my diet so that everything's well-rounded and I'm ready to show up every single day being the best version of myself, being as healthy as possible, so that I can push myself to get that sub 3 hour in the marathon and potentially go beyond that. All right, and so the fourth essential piece of running gear for marathon training is recovery, but it's not what you're thinking with like recovery tools. It's actually sleepy time tea. So one of the biggest things that I've found over the marathons that I've trained for is that sleep is crucial to making sure you can show up every single day, ready to train, ready to put in the high mileage you will need to be ready for the marathon, and then ready to show up on race day, ready to give your best effort on race day. And honestly, sleep was one of the things that I was probably the worst at in some of my previous training blocks. So one thing I've really been intentional with this time around in my training is making sure that I have a really good sleep regimen. And that starts by doing things to help me get better sleep overall. So one thing I have done, which isn't in this like training essential, but is still crucial to it, is cutting out caffeine earlier in the day, because I was notorious for drinking cups of coffee right before bed, thinking that I could just fall asleep right after, and it still was messing with my sleep. And so the next thing that I did to kind of help with that was start taking an herbal tea to help kind of just relax my body and get it prepared for sleep. And so sleepy time tea is an absolute essential. I drink at least 1 tea bag every single night, maybe 2. But like I said, I'll do at least 1 tea bag every single night to make sure I just get my body ready and relaxed to go to bed so that I can get the best night of sleep possible. And sleepy time tea helps me get there. And then the other marathon training essential for recovery actually has to do just specifically with race day or the night before race day. So this isn't something I actually utilize for marathon training, but I still thought it was important to share because it is critical to how I show up on race day. So I have my son's children's sleep melatonin. And one of the main reasons I started utilizing melatonin the day before a race was because I found that the main times you want to be using melatonin is when your body's kind of completely out of sync with what you're normally doing. And because of some of the habits I've created, especially with like the sleepy time tea and trying to go to bed at a specific hour, that on race day or the day before race day, things are kind of crazy. You might have done a shakeout run, met a ton of people, like there's a ton of excitement and buzz. You're really nervous. There's like maybe a lot of adrenaline or just whatever's kind of going through. And you're also most likely going to be going to bed way earlier than you normally would. And so I found in previous races prior to Philly, I would literally struggle to fall asleep. You do that thing where you like close your eyes and pretend to sleep so that you actually fall asleep, but it doesn't work. And then you try all these different tricks to fall asleep. Next thing you know, your alarm's going off and it's 3 or 4 in the morning and you feel like you got no sleep, and now you somehow have to perform the best at 26 miles that you've ever done, potentially, with 0 sleep. And so I found that with melatonin, it kind of helps get my body into that state I need it to when everything's kind of out of sync. So usually the day before the race is the only time I'll take it. I'll just take whatever the prescribed is. For children 6 to 12 years old, it's 2 gummies. So typically I'll just do 2, maybe 3 if I'm like really feeling like I need it to help. But again, I'm just using melatonin to help me recover so that on race day I can try and perform at my best and make sure that sleep wasn't a reason I missed my goal, or at least hopefully it's not one of the reasons. And so melatonin is just a way to help get me there and make sure that I'm, like I said, fully recovered for race day. All right, and the 5th and final running gear essential for marathon training. I actually had a hard time coming up with whatever this is. I was gonna call it books, but it's kind of more than books, so let's just call it resources. But it is running books / resources. All right, so for my half marathon early in the year, I actually used Faster Road Racing from Pete Fitzinger. I also used this for the base plan to get up to the mileage I needed to do the training plan for this. And then I also have Advanced Marathoning from Pete Fitzinger, again, using the base plan to get me to the mileage I needed to be for the marathon. I did do some of the weeks for my marathon training with this, but then shifted over to a Macmillan training plan, just based on some life things that happened that made it a little easier to do time-based running over the mile-based running that's in here. But one of the reasons I think this is absolutely essential for anyone who's training for any type of race, because as you can see, 5K to half marathon, as well as the advanced marathoning, is that not only do you get really good training plans in these books to follow to help give you guidance for how you should get ready and prepare for the distance you're going to race, it also has a bunch of supplemental tools within a book. Is a great way to help you learn all the different aspects of the training and really connect the why to why you are doing some of these things. Because I know when I first started out with my marathon training, I did the Hal Higdon app, and as good as that app was for a beginner who knew nothing, it did give me what I needed, but it didn't really help explain the why to why I was doing some of the things I was doing. I just knew I needed to show up today and do whatever was on the app, and that was it. And then kind of trust that whatever I was doing was enough to get me across the finish line in whatever goal I had set out for that first marathon. But these types of books, running books, have really helped connect some of the dots so that not only am I showing up every single day and doing what the scheduled workout is, I understand why I'm doing the scheduled workout and what I'm trying to actually accomplish with that workout, what type of system it's working, and then how it's helping me improve towards the marathon and towards that goal of a sub 3 hour marathon. All right, and so with that, that's episode 1 of the sub 3 hour marathon training series. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to making more episodes going over the different aspects of my marathon training to show you how I plan on breaking sub 3 in the marathon.